Hi, everybody, and welcome to Mysteries of Ancient Earth. Tonight, you find yourself standing on the southern rim of Gondwana, a continent long swallowed by ice, time, and tectonic drift. The ground beneath your boots is frozen solid, yet creaks like old floorboards in a house that remembers too much. Cold wind sighs across the barren stretch, and overhead, the stars are so sharp they might pierce the sky open. You're not sure exactly what century, or rather, what epoch, you've arrived in. But it's safe to say no GPS is getting you out of this one. The sun is a low, sullen smear, barely dragging itself over the horizon before it gives up and slips away again. A pale light touches the icy land, revealing just how little of it is awake. You're surrounded by towering slabs of glacial ice, older than anything your calendar app can process. Somewhere behind you, a glacier groans like it's stretching after a long nap. The ice here is miles thick in places, locking away entire forgotten worlds beneath it. And as you'll soon see, some of those worlds were once warm, green, and full of life. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You take your first few steps deeper into Gondwana's ice-cloaked mystery, boots crunching softly on frost-rimed stone. Here's your first reality check. You probably wouldn't survive long in this climate without help. But let's pretend for a while that you've got infinite layers of ethically sourced wool and the metabolism of a snow leopard. Your breath fogs out in front of you, curling like a ghost. But even here, in this seeming nothingness, Earth remembers. Because long ago, millions of years before TikTok, before pyramids, before even birds, the world you're standing on wasn't cold at all. It was temperate. It had rivers. It had trees. And somehow, it had creatures who adapted to live here. This was Gondwana, a supercontinent stitched together from pieces of what we now call South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica. Yep, Antarctica used to be warm. You heard that right. It was once so lush it supported entire forests, canopies of strange trees and mosses, ancient insects flitting through fern-thick underbrush. Mainstream geology confirms this with fossilized wood, pollen grains, and even root systems preserved in places that now lie under half a mile of ice. But the cozy detail? Some paleobotanists still carry thermoses of tea into those digs, just to pour a steaming cup and warm their hands on what was once rainforest. Historians still argue whether this area was ever fully tropical or simply mild. That's historians speak for. We really don't know. The planet was weird, but one thing's certain. The idea of ancient Antarctica as an Eden underlines just how little permanence the Earth's surface really has. Now imagine it. You walk toward a crevice where blue ice gleams like cut sapphire. You press your hand to the side and feel, not just the cold, but the sheer pressure of time itself. Somewhere below, deeper than any subway system, are layers of sediment where the past is perfectly pressed into stone. Creatures you've never heard of. Plants that have no cousins alive today. And they're quiet. Not because they're gone, but because they're sleeping. Fossils, after all, are just dreams turned to stone. But here's your first quirky twist. Among all the creatures trapped beneath this sheet, some scientists believe there are pockets of life still down there. Microbes, ancient bacteria adapted to pitch black, zero sunlight, and intense cold. They've been isolated for so long, they might as well be aliens. In 2014, researchers drilled down into Lake Willans, hidden beneath 800 meters of Antarctic ice, and discovered microbial life, living, thriving, doing whatever microscopic things they do. So the next time someone says nothing lives in Antarctica, well, tell them to dig deeper. As you move forward, the land dips into a shallow valley glazed with rime. Your footsteps echo, muffled by snowdrift. Ahead, you notice something odd, small, regular ridges in the ice, like someone or something dragged its claws here long ago. A shiver runs through you, and not from the cold. Welcome to the starting line of our journey into a world that wasn't supposed to exist. And yet, like so many things on this ancient earth, it absolutely did. You descend into the valley, crunching softly through snow that seems to glow faintly in the low polar light. There's no wind here, just the hush of cold silence, the kind that wraps around your ears and swallows sound whole. It's a stillness thick enough to stir something primal in your chest. Instinctively, you start scanning the horizon, not for predators, there are none, but for anything alive. And then you see it, a cluster of stubby, knee-high trees huddled together like old friends braving a storm. They don't look like any modern forest you've wandered through. Their branches are thick and low, their leaves small and waxy, glistening with frost. This isn't the realm of towering pines or lush tropical vines. This is Glossopteris country. You brush snow off a fallen leaf nearby. It's shaped like a tongue, broad, flat, veined. And it's fossilized. Solid rock. You're not the first to find one, of course. Glossopteris fossils have been dug up across all the southern continents, like scattered puzzle pieces of an ancient botanical empire. Mainstream paleobotanists agree. These trees once dominated Gondwana's cold-adapted forests. But they're more than just extinct plants. They were, for a long time, evidence. Back in the 19th century, before plate tectonics was even a twinkle in a geologist's eye, these identical leaf fossils showing up on opposite ends of the Earth sparked one radical idea. Maybe the continents had once been joined. Today, that idea seems obvious. But at the time, it was academic heresy. So thank a long-dead tree if you ever win a trivia night with what proved continental drift. You run your fingers along the petrified trunk. Its bark is patterned with strange striations, almost like fingerprints. Glossopteris didn't just grow. They thrived in cold, low-light conditions and might have even had a few tricks modern trees don't. Here's your quirky tidbit of the night. Some scientists speculate these trees may have followed a kind of prehistoric circadian rhythm, shutting down their growth completely during polar darkness, and then bursting back to life when light returned. Like a bear, but leafy. You step further into the grove. The air smells of mineral and ice and something faintly herbal. Your imagination, maybe, but it's comforting. The snow beneath the trees is lighter, fluffier, less packed. And scattered across it are more ancient plants. Club mosses the size of your thigh, fern fronds brown by time. This is where you begin to understand something crucial. Gondwana wasn't always frozen. It cycled through climate shifts, milder periods when forests spread wide, and colder times when they clung only to sheltered valleys and geothermal nooks. Evolution didn't stop during these freezes. It just got more creative. Historians still argue whether some of these forests survived year-round under snow or if it simply resprouted from hardy underground root systems each spring. Either way, they weren't pushovers. Life here learned how to wait. You pause, kneeling beside a patch of fossilized roots embedded in the rock. They're thin, wiry like veins or maybe a nervous system. They spread outward in every direction, tangled and deliberate. These plants weren't just surviving. They were collaborating, forming dense mats to conserve heat, sharing resources through underground fungal networks. Yes, trees can do that. It's like the forest had a secret plan. You can almost hear it breathing. As you stand, the wind kicks up again. Just a light touch, enough to rustle the frost-laced fronds and send a thin curtain of snow swirling over the grove. You shield your face and squint, and for a second, you think you see movement. But it's not a deer or a bear. It's you stepping backward in time. Your surroundings begin to shift, slowly, dreamily. The frost melts from the trees. The sky brightens, warming into twilight gold. The snow retreats into earth, and the Glossopteris rise taller, greener. You're now walking through a living prehistoric forest. Dragonflies with foot-long wings drift past lazily, landing on fern tips with soft clicks. The air buzzes, not loudly, but just enough to notice. A low hum of insect wings. You spot primitive beetles the size of your palm, and what might be a spider, though you kindly choose to walk the other way. There's no bird song because birds haven't been invented yet. Instead, You hear the rhythmic rustle of foliage and the quiet thud of something large, moving just out of view. We'll get to that in time. For now, you pause in the heart of this ancient grove, listening to Earth whisper to itself. This forest remembers. And soon, you'll remember too. You follow the soft, rustling deeper into the warming forest, the icy grip of the glacial plain, now a fading memory. Beneath your boots, the ground is no longer crunchy snow, but damp, spongy peat. Moss carpets everything. Rocks, fallen trunks, even your shoelaces if you stand still too long. There's an odd scent in the air. Not quite decay, not quite sweetness. It smells ancient, like something left in a cave too long with a hint of root beer. And then you hear it, a soft splash nearby. You turn, heart skipping, not from fear exactly, but a fluttering of curiosity. In the shadow of a low, moss-covered embankment, something stirs the shallow water. You crouch and wait, and there it is. A creature emerges, slow, lumbering, and just wrong in the most wonderful way. Imagine a salamander. Now stretch it to the length of your arm. Give it stubby legs, a wide, flat tail like a canoe paddle, and eyes that don't seem to blink so much as brood. It moves with deliberate slowness, as if it's deeply aware that absolutely no one is in a rush down here. This is a temnospondyle, one of the dominant amphibians of the Permian and early Triassic. Not quite a frog, not quite a lizard, and definitely not something you'd want falling into your bathtub. But in Gondwana, these were royalty. Mainstream paleontologists tell us that creatures like Glossopteris, an especially large genus, once haunted southern riverbeds. In fact, some grew over 13 feet long. Think of it as a sleepy, underwater crocodile with more existential sadness in its eyes. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some scientists believe these amphibians survived long after most of their relatives vanished, clinging to cold refuges like southeastern Australia and Antarctica. Their fossils show up in places we thought were too frigid for anything to thrive. But then again, we underestimated Earth. Again, you step closer to the stream, and the creature disappears in a swirl of silt, vanishing as quietly as it appeared. You wait, but the water only ripples. Historians still argue whether creatures like these were truly cold-adapted or just seasonal migrants. Were they amphibian snowbirds, so to speak? One theory suggests they followed brief summer floods into glacial regions to feed and breed, returning to warmer waters before the frost returned. But some paleoclimatologists push back, pointing to fossil sites that suggest year-round habitation. If that's true, it means these squishy giants may have hibernated, burrowing into riverbeds like sleepy dragons, waiting for the thaw. You follow the stream upstream, tracing its lazy curves through the undergrowth. The temperature dips slightly, but you hardly notice. Your mind is adrift with images of prehistoric ponds full of giant tadpoles and sluggish predators basking on muddy banks. Just ahead, a series of smooth stones crosses the water like stepping stones. You hop across, and for a moment, you feel weightless, like a time traveler skipping between centuries instead of rocks. On the far bank, you find something remarkable, a nest, or maybe a burrow, dug into a slope of mossy earth. It's just large enough to crawl into, if you're feeling bold. And naturally, you are. The tunnel is cool and moist, but surprisingly stable. The walls are reinforced with packed clay, likely dragged in by whatever lived here. It smells of earth and something faintly eggy. Not terrible, but not candle-worthy either. You run your fingers along a pattern scratched into the tunnel wall. Claw marks. Deliberate. Repetitive. Possibly even territorial. Whatever lived here wanted you to know this was its cozy underground studio apartment. And here's a fun twist. Some fossil burrows in Antarctica have been linked to warm-blooded ancestors of mammals. Little creatures like Thrinaxodon that dug elaborate tunnels to escape the harshest months. They curled up underground, snoozing through snowfalls and volcanic winters. Imagine that. Early ancestors of mammals, our great time's a million grandcousins, bundled up in little dirt bunkers while volcanoes erupted and glaciers crept across the land. It's the prehistoric version of wearing a hoodie and refusing to leave the house during finals week. Historians still debate whether these burrowers were communal or solitary. Some burrows suggest multiple chambers. Roommates? Family units? A prehistoric version of house sharing? Maybe. Or maybe they just had excellent taste in real estate. You crawl back out into the dappled light, brushing soil from your sleeves. The forest hums around you, and you pause, realizing you haven't heard a single bird call. That's not an oversight. It's a chronological clue. No birds. No mammals. Not yet. You're still in the age of amphibians, where lungs are optional and scales are fashionable. As you rise to your feet, the forest opens up slightly, revealing a wider floodplain. Pools of still water reflect the low-hanging canopy. Somewhere nearby, a temespondal bellows, a deep, gurgling croak that sounds halfway between a foghorn and someone trying to clear their throat for a TED Talk. You smile. It's not exactly welcoming, but it's not hostile either. It's just ancient and oddly comforting. The floodplain stretches before you like a soft watercolor painting left out in the rain. Pools of silver water glint between low, muddy ridges. Above you, the sky has settled into a permanent twilight, the kind of filtered light that makes everything look a little sleepy, which, honestly, suits the vibe perfectly. You begin moving across the open space, stepping carefully between pools. The mud here is thick, sticky, but not unpleasant. Every step is followed by a satisfying slurp. It's like walking through chocolate pudding, if chocolate pudding smelled like minerals and moss. Then you see them. Trees again. But these are not the twisted, moss-draped groves of before. These are, well, odd. Tall trunks with no branches until nearly the top. Thick, like columns, with bark that looks more like reptile scales than anything plant-like. Their leaves? Flat, tongue-shaped, and arranged like a fan. Some even show hints of veining where the vascular tissue once ran. Welcome to the age of Glossopteris again. Yes, we met it earlier, but this time you're seeing it in full bloom. A vibrant, bustling grove of these ancient trees, spreading across the plain like a silent army. Mainstream science dates the Glossopteris to around 300 million years ago, a hallmark of the Permian period. These trees didn't just survive here, they defined the landscape. At their peak, Glossopteris forests stretched from Antarctica all the way up through India and South America. It's like a botanical passport, stamped across every major piece of Gondwana. You walk between the trunks, running your hand along the rough bark. It flakes under your touch, releasing a faint, peppery scent. And underfoot, a carpet of fallen leaves crinkles with every step, fossilized in the modern era, but now rustling softly like parchment. You know to pick one up. It's perfect. Veins, midrib, even the faint scalloped edge. A prehistoric bookmark, right out of Earth's old diary. But here's your quirky twist. Glossopteris was likely deciduous, meaning it dropped its leaves during the cold season, which is weird, considering it lived in a place with months of total darkness. Historians still argue whether the trees shut down photosynthesis entirely or used some shadowy trick to keep going. Some even propose they stored sunlight in their tissues, like leafy camels, rationing it during the long polar night. You look up. The canopy above is patchy, letting dappled light through. This forest isn't dense in the way rainforests are. It's measured, spaced, and strangely calm. The trees seem less like plants and more like a very old audience, watching quietly as you pass. And then, in a clearing just ahead, you stop. Something massive lies sprawled on the ground, half sunken into the mud. At first, it looks like a fallen log, but as you step closer, the shape becomes clear. A ribcage, arched like a collapsed cathedral. A long, sinuous spine extends from it, curving slightly before vanishing beneath the wet ground. One limb, folded awkwardly under the weight of the body, ends in long, bony claws. You've just discovered one of Gondwana's great unsolved stories, a polar dinosaur. Dinosaurs in Antarctica? Absolutely. Fossil evidence from Australia and Antarctica confirms it. But this one, it's different. It's frozen in posture, as if it simply laid down and never got back up. You crouch beside it. The skull is narrow, beaked, with small teeth, herbivorous. Maybe a type of Leolinosaura or something similar. The bones are delicate, bird-like, and the eye sockets are huge, possibly to see better in the months of darkness. And here's where the debate starts. Historians still argue whether dinosaurs like this truly lived year-round in polar regions, or if they migrated seasonally. Did they trudge thousands of miles to follow the sun? Or did they stay put, adapting to cold and darkness? There's even a wilder theory that some of them hibernated, not just slowed down, but tucked into burrows, conserving energy like bears or lizards. Fossil growth rings in some bones suggest a seasonal pause in activity, like tree rings, but with more existential implications. You trace a finger along one of the ribs, now stone. Cold, smooth, but still holding the memory of breath. There's something tender about it. A creature that once grazed in this very grove, breathing this very air, albeit through slightly different nostrils. And now it sleeps, preserved not by choice, but by time. You sit back, letting the silence wrap around you. This forest, this creature, this very spot, it all belonged to a world that no longer exists. And yet, here you are, listening to the breathless hush between epochs. You glance up again at the sky. A few flurries drift down, not snow exactly. More like ash. Volcanic, maybe. The Permian period was famous for its bad timing. Massive eruptions, climate swings, extinction events lurking like uninvited guests at every evolutionary party. But for now, everything is still. You're alone, except for the trees, the fossils, and a past that refuses to be forgotten. The light is starting to dim again, not because of time passing, but because the forest is thickening. The trees grow closer together, and the ferns rise higher, brushing your knees as you walk. There's a damp chill in the air, the kind that seeps in behind your collar, no matter how many layers you imagine you're wearing. You reach a slope, gentle but deliberate, leading downward into a shaded hollow. And there, half concealed by tangled roots and earth, is a hole. No, not a pit. A burrow. It's oval, just wide enough to crawl through on hands and knees. The earth around the opening is tamped down, packed tight with claw marks that were clearly made on purpose. There's a kind of order to them, like someone raking the dirt with intent. You pause. You look around. Nothing stirs. Then you take a deep breath and crawl inside. At first, the tunnel is cool and smells like wet clay. But a few feet in, it opens slightly, like a chamber carved deliberately into the hillside. The walls are surprisingly smooth, reinforced by roots and layers of mud. It's warmer here, still and insulated, and for a moment you imagine what it would be like to spend a long, frozen night tucked away in this underground cradle. You turn your headlamp, that you absolutely have for plot purposes, toward the floor and spot it, a fossil curled into the curve of the chamber. It's small, maybe the size of a modern raccoon. A rounded body, delicate forelimbs tucked beneath it, long spine curled like a cat in a sunbeam. The skull is narrow, with small teeth and two neat sockets for eyes. Not a dinosaur, not a mammal either. This is Thrinaxodon, a cynodont, an early relative of mammals. Mainstream paleontologists consider Thrinaxodon a superstar of the early Triassic period. It walked the line between reptile and mammal, with features from both. It had fur, probably, whiskers, likely, and dug burrows. Its fossils have been found curled up, just like this, perfectly preserved in ancient dens. But here's the twist that gets cozy. One fossilized burrow in South Africa contained two different species, a Thrinaxodon and a small amphibian, side by side. Did they cohabitate? Hibernate together? Historians still argue whether this was a peaceful arrangement, an accident, or the prehistoric equivalent of crashing on someone's couch and overstaying your welcome. You smile in the dim light, imagining this tiny proto-mammal snoring softly in its burrow while snow fell overhead. It's oddly relatable. You've been there, haven't you? Hiding from the world, blankets up to your ears, waiting for spring to return. The chamber you're in shows signs of reuse. Scratch marks at multiple depths. A faint layering of silt at the bottom. This wasn't a one-time shelter. It was a home. You sit back, knees drawn up, head nearly brushing the roof. It's quiet here. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels full. Full of breath, heartbeat, instinct. Full of creatures that didn't roar or fly or stomp, but burrowed, hibernated, and outlasted the loud ones. Modern science often focuses on the biggest, flashiest species, dinosaurs, megafauna. But here in the dark, it's the small, quiet beings that carried life forward. You brush your hand along the wall and feel a soft texture, fossilized fur, maybe, or maybe just wishful thinking. Either way, it sends a tingle up your spine. This little creature lived through extinction-level events, volcanoes, darkness, and deep cold, and you're sitting in its living room. You crawl back out into the fading forest light, blinking as the gloom recedes. Above you, a group of strange plants sways gently in the breeze. Club mosses, horsetails, and towering tree ferns. They haven't changed much in 250 million years, which, frankly, makes them better at long-term commitment than most people. You take one last look back at the burrow. The entrance is just a shadow now, hidden by leaves and moss. But you know it's there, and you know what it meant for one small creature and maybe for all of us. It's proof that survival isn't always about being the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes it's about being quiet, adaptable, and knowing when to curl up and wait. You continue on, the canopy closing behind you like curtains. Somewhere ahead, the ground will start to tremble. But for now, let yourself linger in the warmth of the burrow and remember, some of the most powerful stories in Earth's history happened in places no one was looking. The ground shifts beneath your feet, not dramatically, not enough to knock you down, but just enough to make you stop walking mid-step. It's a long, slow rumble, like an ancient beast rolling over in its sleep beneath the crust. You turn your head, scanning the grove behind you, the clearing ahead, the shadows in between. Nothing stirs. And then you feel it again, just a subtle shudder, this time followed by the faintest hint of warmth beneath the soles of your imaginary boots. You've just entered one of the strangest paradoxes of prehistoric Gondwana, a volcanic landscape hidden beneath glacial stillness. Right now, under what we think of as Antarctica, there are more than 100 volcanoes, some extinct, some dormant, and some possibly still active. They didn't arrive after the ice. They were there before, shaping the land, whispering through fault lines, and occasionally ruining the day for anything living nearby. You descend a slope toward a steaming fissure in the earth, where mist clings low to the ground and the snow has melted away in streaks. The mud here is warm, slick, and smells faintly like sulfur and wet charcoal. Your breath catches, not from the smell, but from the sight. A cluster of lava tubes, cracked open and exposed like the ribs of some buried monster. These hollow tunnels once carried molten rock through the earth, but now they've cooled, leaving behind perfect hiding places, shelters from the cold, safe corridors beneath the surface. Early animals likely used them. Plants may have clung to their edges, drawing heat from the stone. In fact, these thermal refuges may have allowed certain species to survive mass extinctions. Historians still argue whether these lava tubes could have supported entire ecosystems, pockets of warmth where evolution could continue in isolation. Some fringe theorists, the cozy kind, not the aluminum hat kind, have even wondered aloud whether life beneath the Antarctic ice today might be doing the same thing, hiding in volcanic warmth, just waiting. You crouch beside one of the tubes. The rock is glassy, black, and spiderwebbed with cracks. Inside, the tunnel curves down into darkness, gently steaming like a sleeping tea kettle. Your hand rests on the edge. It's warm. Here's your quirky tidbit for the night. Some modern scientists have proposed that ancient volcanic activity beneath Antarctica may have helped trigger glaciation in the first place. Not because it cooled the Earth, oh no, but because it shifted the crust enough to change ocean currents and atmospheric patterns. In other words, Gondwana might have frozen because it burped too hard. You inch your way into one of the lava tubes, the walls narrowing slightly, the air getting damper but still oddly cozy. Water drips from cracks in the ceiling, landing with soft plink sounds that echo down the passage. Mosses cling to pockets of condensation. There's no light, and yet something stirs in your imagination. A feeling, like something is watching, not with eyes but with memory. You stop listening, and then you hear it. Not movement, but hissing. Not dangerous, not threatening. Just steam escaping from a distant vent. The breath of a world still alive beneath the surface. You turn around and crawl back into daylight, blinking at the diffused glow of the forest beyond. The air here feels cooler now, like the volcano reminded it who's boss. As you walk, you begin to see signs of volcanic past everywhere. Dark streaks of basalt stone, frozen flows of what was once lava, now crumbled into fertile soil. And in that soil, new life always found a way. In fact, the interplay between fire and frost may have been one of the great hidden engines of evolution here. Volcanoes would erupt, clear swaths of forest, release minerals, warm local climates. And in the aftermath, rebirth. Plants like Glossopteris returned. Amphibians reoccupied the warm river valleys. And creatures like Thrinaxodon dug deeper, adapting not just to survive the cold, but to live with the fire beneath it. You reach a ridge that overlooks the valley you just crossed. From this height, you can see patterns in the land. Long, sweeping flows of dark stone interrupted by patches of still frozen ground. The glaciers weren't just rolling over the land like a soft-serve machine. They were being shaped from below by heat. This, you realize, was Gondwana's secret rhythm, a dance between ice and fire, between deep time and deep pressure. And right now, you're standing in the middle of its most intimate moment, when both forces were active, silent, and deadly. You sit down on a warm, flat rock. The sky overhead has shifted again, tinged with red and violet, casting a surreal glow over the landscape. In the distance, a low rumble rolls beneath your feet once more. Not a roar, not an explosion, just earth adjusting its blankets. You rise slowly from the warmth of the basalt stone, brushing flecks of volcanic dust from your hands. The air has grown hazier now, still calm, still cool, but with that strange, dreamy tint that makes every shadow feel a little deeper, every tree just slightly more ancient than before. And just ahead, you see something that doesn't quite fit. A row of trees. But not just any trees. These are taller, denser, and locked in what seems to be perfect formation, like soldiers lined up for a roll call no one remembers. You step closer. The bark is fibrous, rough, and ridged like layers of ancient paper, and the trunks twist upward in a slow spiral that makes your neck ache just looking. You've stumbled into a prehistoric rainforest. Yes, here, in what will someday become Antarctica. Mainstream geologists once dismissed the very idea. Too cold, too remote, too improbable. But in 2019, a team drilling beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet discovered fossilized roots, pollen grains, and even fragments of leaf matter so well preserved they look like they'd fallen just a few seasons ago. The evidence was clear. 93 million years ago, this place was temperate, wet, and full of life. You walk between the towering trees, the air now thick with imaginary humidity. Giant horsetails sway above your head, brushing against taller ferns. Somewhere nearby, water drips from a canopy of leaves the size of dinner plates. Every surface is alive with moss, fungi, and the quiet activity of things that don't need sunlight to know it's morning. Your quirky tidbit tonight? Some fossil leaves found in Antarctica still show signs of insect chewing. That's right, tiny prehistoric bugs gnawed on them before they fell, meaning there wasn't just flora here, but a thriving food web. In other words, not a frozen desert, but a functioning ecosystem. You pause beside a cluster of fossilized roots still tangled in their original soil, perfectly preserved by time and pressure. And then you glance up and see it, a towering conifer, likely a relative of the extinct podocarps. Its branches spread wide, casting deep green shade. Unlike the gnarled Glossopteris, this tree is orderly, symmetrical, elegant. It wouldn't look out of place in a fantasy novel. Ancient, noble, maybe home to a sleepy forest spirit who forgot to set an alarm for the last 90 million years. And yet, here it is. Quiet, tall, waiting. Historians still argue whether this polar rainforest was evergreen or deciduous. The truth is, it may have been both, depending on the season, species, and exact location. But what's certain is that it defied all modern expectations. It thrived at the poles, and it changed everything we thought we knew about ancient Earth's climate. You step into a hollow between roots and find yourself in a kind of natural chamber, cool, moist, and echoing with the sounds of distant dripping water. A chorus of insect wings hums somewhere above, and you imagine feathered dinosaurs picking their way through the shadows, chirping softly. Because yes, feathered dinosaurs were likely here too. In this rainforest, during the Cretaceous period, small theropods may have nested among the roots. Their feathers weren't for flight, but for insulation. Like little prehistoric puffballs stalking lizards and beetles. You don't see them now, of course, but the trees remember. You rest your back against a fallen trunk, soft with moss and thyme, and look up again. The canopy above has shifted colors, darker now, touched with bronze. The light has changed, but the rainforest doesn't care. It exists outside of urgency, outside of seasons even. It's here because it adapted. Back then, atmospheric CO2 was much higher. The Earth's temperatures were warmer globally, even at the poles. And that warmth allowed lush forests like this to spread much farther than they do today. But they weren't tropical. They were temperate and incredibly specialized to endure months of darkness. Some of the trees, according to fossil analysis, had unusually thick leaves, a possible adaptation to low-light photosynthesis. Others grew rapidly during the sunlit months, storing energy like squirrels hoarding acorns. Historians still debate how long these forests lasted before glaciers swallowed them. But they agree on one thing. Their existence changes how we understand climate, migration, and even the potential for habitability on other planets. Because if life thrived in a near-Arctic rainforest millions of years ago, who's to say where else it might bloom? You close your eyes, listening to the gentle rustling above and the soft hum of the forest breathing. The rain begins to fall warm, steady, misty. It beads on the ferns, trickles down trunks, and gathers in small pools around your feet. There's no urgency here, no predators stalking, just life, old and slow and stubborn, proving again and again that even in the most unlikely corners of the world, growth finds a way. And as you walk forward once more, deeper into the greenery, the sounds of the forest folding in behind you, you carry with you a sense of wonder. Because this place, once thought impossible, was not only real, it was beautiful. The rain softens to a mist as you leave the dense forest behind, stepping out on a firmer ground, silty and damp, with strange patterns pressed into it. You pause. Footprints. They're not recent, of course. These are fossilized, hardened into stone. But they're sharp, three-toed impressions spaced evenly, like someone took a stroll just moments before you arrived. And the scale? About the size of chicken. If that chicken wore snowshoes and possibly had knives for toes. You follow the tracks, feeling your pulse quicken, not out of fear, but that deep, giddy curiosity that bubbles up when you know you're about to uncover something odd and wonderful. The tracks lead you to a shallow ravine, and perched atop a rock, mid-stride as though frozen in time, is a fossilized skeleton, legs tucked beneath it, arms curled close to its chest, tail curved like a comma. A small dinosaur. This is Liaonosaura, one of Gondwana's most intriguing residents. A tiny herbivorous ornithopod with huge eyes, adapted not for hunting, but for surviving months of darkness. Mainstream paleontologists believe Liaonosaura was a polar dinosaur, native to regions of what is now Australia and Antarctica. And unlike their tropical cousins, these little creatures had to survive long winters without sunlight, warmth, or very much food. Here's your quirky tidbit. This dinosaur had exceptionally long tail vertebrae, far more than most dinosaurs of its kind. Some theories suggest its tail may have acted as a counterbalance while it ran. Others think it was used for communication or even warmth, like a prehistoric scarf you could sit on. You crouch beside the fossil and trace the outline of its eye socket. It's enormous, Paleontologists believe this dinosaur had a retina adapted to low light, possibly even near-infrared. In other words, it was the night vision goggles of the Cretaceous. Historians still argue whether Leelinosaura was truly non-migratory. Could such a small creature really withstand sub-zero winters? Or did it scamper thousands of miles north each year, dodging predators and volcanic ash to reach more hospitable climates? Recent fossil sites suggest they stayed put. Their bones show growth rings, some with seasonal slowdowns, others with continuous development. That's the kicker. Some polar dinosaurs may not have hibernated at all. They simply kept growing, munching on hardy ferns, mosses, and whatever else they could dig out of the snow. You follow the ridge along the ravine, the wind brushing lightly through your hair. Well, imagination hair. The view opens up, revealing a broad floodplain carved by ancient glacial meltwater. It gleams with traces of copper and basalt, and here and there, bones poke up like the teeth of buried clocks. This was once a corridor of movement. Herds of dinosaurs passed through here, maybe even families led by older, wiser individuals who knew the rhythm of the seasons. Perhaps they built shallow nests in the softer banks. Perhaps they laid eggs that hatched during the brief summer, their chicks tumbling around under a ceiling of ferns and freezing stars. You imagine it. Leelinosaura young huddled in burrows lined with moss, chirping in the dark like sleepy songbirds, waiting for the sun to rise again after a 3-month nap. That's the thing about polar life. It's not about surviving the dark. It's about adapting to it, owning it, making it your own. You spot more tracks now, larger ones, moving perpendicular to the smaller prints. 3 toes again, but broader, heavier, likely a predator, perhaps a Timimus or an Antarctic cousin of Truden. Fast, clever, and likely feathered. The ecosystem unfolds in your mind. Predator and prey, ferns and fungi, light and darkness. It wasn't just a frozen wasteland. It was a functional polar world, rich with evolutionary experiments. And here's the softest twist of all. These tiny dinosaurs lived at a time when Antarctica had forests, rivers, and rain, but was already beginning its slow march toward ice. These creatures didn't just survive change. They lived in its shadow every day. You sit on the edge of the ravine, feet dangling over a shelf of ancient rock, and let yourself imagine the quiet moments. A juvenile dinosaur peering through the dusk, its wide eyes reflecting the last sliver of sunlight. A storm of snow falling quietly onto thick feathers. A nest of eggs warmed by body heat and fern insulation. These weren't monsters. They were neighbors, survivors, creatures that curled into one another beneath the stars and waited for spring to return. And as the rain returns, soft, rhythmic, steady, you close your eyes and feel it too. The quiet resolve, the patience, the echo of tiny feet on frozen ground, moving steadily through the dark. The sky above you glows with a dusty amber hue now, somewhere between sunset and starlight. You rise from your perch at the edge of the ravine, brushing your hands against your sides, and begin following a winding path along the high ground. The forest and wetlands are behind you now. Ahead, the landscape opens into rolling hills of dark rock and scattered boulders, as though giants once played marbles here and forgot to clean up. But these aren't just rocks. You step closer to one. It's smooth, almost polished. Faint ridges spiral across its surface like the whorls of a fingerprint. And when you reach out and lay your palm against it, it's cold, but not lifeless. Not quite. This is no boulder. It's a fossilized stromatolite, the ancient remains of microbial colonies that once ruled the earth. Before trees, before dinosaurs, before bones, there were these. You just stumbled upon a primordial reef, a place where cyanobacteria, sunlight, and time layered together into towers of living stone. They look humble, sure, but don't be fooled. These were the architects of breathable air. Mainstream science confirms that stromatolites were some of Earth's earliest oxygen-producing organisms, dating back over 3.5 billion years. They were here long before Gondwana was even a thought, back when Earth continents were just lonely rocks bumping into each other like awkward party guests. But what's this ancient reef doing here, tucked into a hillside that will someday freeze over for eternity? Because, you see, even in Antarctica, even in Gondwana's forgotten corners, life found a way to layer itself into permanence. You crouch and trace one of the concentric patterns. The ripples look like tiny waves frozen in place. If you press your ear close enough, you can almost imagine the faintest fizz of photosynthesis, bacteria gulping sunlight, and exhaling a gas that would someday allow parrots, pizza ovens, and parasailing. Your quirky tidbit for this stroll through microbial history? Even today, living stromatolites still exist. In places like Shark Bay, Australia, where hypersaline waters keep out modern grazers. They bubble quietly under the sun, carrying on the slow, noble work of transforming light into life. Historians and geologists still argue over how these structures fossilized so well. Was it rapid burial, volcanic ash, sudden environmental changes, or just the sheer persistence of single-celled ambition? You wander deeper into the field, and now you see dozens of these domes. Some are knee-high, others barely peek above the soil. A few have broken open, revealing their laminated insides. Each band a diary entry in stone, recording tides, storms, and sun cycles over eons. You walk slower now, not out of fatigue, but out of reverence. This is not a ruin. It's a monument to time itself. Here, bacteria worked together long before cooperation had a name. They built towers of calcium and sediment, rising toward the light with no brains, no hands, and no ego. And in doing so, they changed the atmosphere, oxygenated the oceans, and paved the way for complex life, including you. You sit on a low slab and take in the view. It's strange and humbling to realize that this quiet little patch of stone might be one of Earth's most influential places, not because of drama or predators or extinction events, but because it was patient. You reach into your pocket, again, for narrative convenience, and imagine placing a small offering, maybe a pebble, a leaf, or just your breath at the base of the nearest fossil. A tribute to a world you can barely understand. In the distance, you hear a faint, hollow wind curling through the hills. Not a roar, not a howl, just a whisper, as though the earth itself is remembering something. And you realize this place wasn't forgotten. It was just quiet. Sometimes the loudest stories in Earth's history come from the softest origins. A colony of bacteria, a breath of oxygen, a ripple of time captured in stone. You stand and walk on, leaving the reef behind, but its story follows you, layered in your thoughts now, part of your breath. You look up at the sky, where the stars are starting to pierce through the mist. Their light, too, is ancient, but somehow still warm. You walk gently now. You've seen forests that defied darkness, dinosaurs that stared down polar nights, mammal ancestors that napped through extinction, and now, microbes that shaped the very air you're breathing. Not bad for a stroll through the ice, huh? The stars are fully out now, scattered like ancient quartz across a velvet black sky. Each one flickers with a cold fire, and as you climb a rise of frosted basalt, they seem to lean closer, like they've been waiting for you to look up and notice them. You take a breath, slow and deep. The air here is crisp, sharp, clean, like the world hasn't been breathed on in millions of years. Ahead, the land dips again, forming a broad, silent basin. The floor of it is dotted with smooth stone ovals, like frozen teardrops or fallen moons. You wander between them, boots crunching softly over frost-laced rock. Then you pause. One of the stones is not a stone. It's an egg, fossilized, cracked gently down the side, but unmistakably an egg. Oval, tapered, patterned with faint textures like dried leather. You crouch, run your fingers over it. Nearby, you spot more. A full nest. Welcome to one of Gondwana's rarest gifts to science. Dinosaur nurseries buried beneath ancient snow. It may seem impossible. How could cold, polar regions support nesting dinosaurs? But in parts of present-day Australia and Antarctica, researchers have uncovered signs that certain species not only lived here year-round, but raised their young in these regions too. You brush aside a layer of frost and see the soft remains of what might once have been a clutch, half a dozen or more fossilized eggs, arranged carefully in a circle. This wasn't random. This was parenting. Mainstream paleontology points to the idea that some polar dinosaurs, perhaps even our old friend Leonosaura, were capable of extended parental care. Their young may have hatched unable to fend for themselves, relying on adults to protect, feed, and teach them during the long winter months. And here's your quirky twist. The growth rings in the bones of juvenile polar dinosaurs suggest slow, continuous growth, not interrupted by hibernation. In other words, they may have stayed active, even in freezing darkness, huddling in burrows, feeding on winter ferns, or relying on body heat shared with their parents. Historians still argue over how extensive this parenting behavior was. Did polar dinosaurs build complex nests like birds? Did they feed their young or simply guard them? Or were they more like crocodiles, burying the eggs and hoping for the best? You glance up again at the basin around you. It has the feel of a nursery, sheltered, quiet, shielded from wind by ridges and ancient trees. You can almost see it. Adults pacing slowly between nests, heads low, watching for predators. Hatchlings chirping in the dusk, awkward on their feet, bumping into one another like toddlers in puffy coats. And in the center of it all, one massive fossil lies curled like a sleeping dog. A tail, still half buried in sediment. A leg, folded protectively around a long-degraded clutch. A posture that says everything. Guarding. You sit beside it, the rock still warm from the sun's earlier touch. The stars above shimmer and blink, casting long shadows across the fossil surface. This dinosaur didn't just live here, it cared here. Which changes things, doesn't it? Gondwana was not just a survival ground. It was a cradle. This prehistoric Earth wasn't always brutal and toothy. Sometimes it was tender, a place where creatures watched over one another, waited out the cold together, and hoped, just like we do, that the next season would be kind. You lean back and rest your head against a smooth rock, watching a thin curtain of auroras shimmer far on the horizon. Greens and purples ripple faintly across the sky. One last surprise from a planet that never quite runs out of wonder. The breeze carries a soft scent of stone and fern, and in your mind, you imagine the nesting ground alive once more. Soft footsteps, quiet calls, warmth shared beneath the stars. You realize then that the ground you're lying on may have once been heated by body temperature, kept warm not by volcanoes or sunlight, but by family. And that, perhaps, is the real mystery of ancient Earth. Not how life survived the dark and the cold, but how much love it was capable of even then. You wake from your half-dream against the warm stone, blinking up at stars that haven't shifted an inch. Or maybe they have. Time here flows sideways, like mist over frozen ponds, soft, hard to track, and full of secrets. You rise slowly, joints a little stiffer now because even in imagined prehistoric walks, fatigue sneaks in. You stretch, glance one last time at the sleeping fossil beside its nest, then start down the gentle slope that cradles the basin. Your breath fogs faintly in the air. Ahead, the ground becomes strangely flat. Not quite a meadow, more like a frozen plaza carved by time and weather. And then you see them, tools. Well, not hammers or blades, or perfectly napped arrowheads. These are simpler, stones arranged deliberately, some broken in specific ways, others smoothed by repeated use. Just enough pattern to whisper, a hand was here. You've entered one of Gondwana's greatest mysteries, signs of early human ancestors at the far edge of the ancient world. Now, before you raise an eyebrow, no, Homo sapiens weren't in Antarctica, but along the southern tips of what we now call Africa, Australia, and South America, once joined to this very supercontinent, early hominins left clues. And some scientists believe the migrations that followed the breakup of Gondwana may have shaped early human evolution in profound, unexpected ways. You crouch beside a cluster of dark basalt flakes, each one chipped just so, sharp edges, clean strikes like someone had sat here, making simple scrapers. Tools that wouldn't look out of place in a modern bushcraft video. Except this video would be 2 million years long, with no dialogue. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. One site in South Africa, dating back over 160,000 years, shows early humans harvesting marine life. Mussels, crabs, even sea snails. Some scholars think this coastal resourcefulness gave Homo sapiens the nutritional edge we needed to outlast other hominins. And what does that have to do with Gondwana? Well, this supercontinent's breakup formed coastal ecosystems across its rim. As the land cracked and split, it created estuaries, tidal flats, and fertile shores, exactly the kind of rich zones where early humans, or their precursors, could thrive. Historians still argue whether this continental shuffling directly influenced our evolutionary arc. Did we move with the land, or did the land move us? You touch one of the flakes, cool and smooth. It's unlikely anyone ever sat exactly here, in this basin in the snow, but symbolically it connects. Across deep time and split continents, those first tools were extensions of something very human: curiosity. We didn't just survive, we explored. We broke stones because we could. We shaped bone, fire, pigments. We made things that weren't just useful, but meaningful. You walk on, noticing more arrangements, patterns in the stone, bits of fossilized pigment, ochre smudged on rock. Perhaps ceremonial, perhaps a doodle, perhaps an early version of someone saying, "Hey, I was here." A soft chuckle escapes you. Even now, we still leave marks in snow, in sand, in digital clouds. Nothing changes. You reach a rise overlooking a wide, frozen lake, one that would have been open water millions of years ago. The stars reflect faintly on its glassy surface. And in that reflection, you catch a glimpse, not of your own face, but of 100 hands reaching through time, chipping stones, lighting fires, telling stories in charcoal and breath. You settle onto a boulder at the lake's edge. The silence is deep now, not hollow, not lonely, just full. You think of the proto-mammals curled in burrows, of feathered dinosaurs blinking in the polar dusk, of forests growing under auroras, of bacteria making air, and now of hands, carving, scraping, trying, becoming. It's easy to forget, in all the scale and science of prehistory, that the softest tool was always imagination. It's what pulled us from stone to story, from survival to meaning. You lean back and watch your breath fog the air one more time. Then you whisper to the dark just once, "I was here." And in the stillness, it almost feels like something whispers back. The air grows thinner now as you climb again, slow, deliberate steps up an ancient glacier's ghost. The incline isn't steep, but the silence makes it feel steeper. Behind you lies the lake, the tools, the whispering echoes of early hands. Ahead, a ridge carved by time and wind and weight, where ice once ruled like a sleeping giant. You crest the hill, and it stretches before you, a broad plateau of scratched stone, where glaciers once dragged themselves across Gondwana's surface, leaving behind grooves and striations like claw marks from the sky. You step carefully across the rock. Long, parallel lines sweep beneath your boots, etched deeper than memory. These aren't just scars, they're signatures, evidence of one of Earth's most dramatic, mysterious eras, the Cryogenian period. Around 700 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, before forests, before eyes, Earth may have been locked in a state we now call snowball Earth. Imagine it. The entire planet wrapped in ice from pole to equator. Oceans frozen, clouds silenced. A white, breathless world turning in slow motion. Geologists argue whether the freeze was total or just nearly so. Some think pockets of warmth remain near the equator, slushball Earth, if you prefer the less apocalyptic flavor. But all agree, it was cold enough, long enough to reset life itself. And Gondwana? It was at the center of it all. You kneel beside one groove in the stone and run your fingers through a shallow depression. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. But it's real. Left by a glacier that moved with the patience of tectonic poetry. Inch by inch, year by year, dragging rock over rock, carving truth into the land. Your quirky tidbit: some of the oldest signs of complex life appear immediately after these glaciations ended. Multicellular organisms, ediacaran fauna, soft-bodied weirdos with no modern analogs. It's as if Earth said, okay, enough of that. Let's try something strange now. Historians and climatologists still debate why the cryogenian freezes happened. Was it volcanic dimming? Atmospheric oxygen shifts? The sun throwing a mild tantrum? Maybe all of the above. What matters is what came next: a great unfreezing. You sit down on a lichen-crusted ledge, letting your eyes wander across the plateau. Here and there, embedded in the stone, are dropstones, chunks of foreign rock carried and dropped by ancient icebergs into sediment layers that are now solid ground. It's like the Earth got bored during the freeze and played cosmic bingo with its rocks. And that's the quiet joke of it all. Even in the coldest chapters of Earth's story, things were moving. Ice advancing, retreating. Mountains rising, eroding. Life hiding in cracks, waiting for the lights to come back on. You lean back, the rock warming slightly under your weight. Overhead, wisps of clouds stretch thin across the stars. The air tastes metallic like old stone and memory. And then, in the distance, you hear it, a long, low creak, like ancient ice shifting its weight in its grave. It's imaginary, sure, but you feel it. The tug of old glaciers. The breath of a frozen planet remembering how to wake up. You walk on. As you move, you imagine the world unfreezing. Light returning, oceans sighing back into motion, microbial mats stretching toward warmth. The slow dance of recovery, of resilience. Because this place wasn't destroyed. It was reset. And what came next was weirder, wilder, and wonderfully alive. At your feet, the grooves in the stone begin to fade. Ahead, you see hints of vegetation again. Stubby ferns, the ghosts of roots, the promise of what's to come. You're walking out of ice and into evolution. But part of you lingers, on the edge of that great frozen page in Earth's diary, where the planet paused, took a breath, and considered what it might become next. And you, lucky sleeper, were here to witness it. The stone under your feet has changed again. It's warmer, smoother, and dusted with the finest traces of green, mosses, lichens, and long-dead plant matter ground into the earth like ancient tea leaves. You step forward, each footfall a soft echo of something older than footprints. The terrain ahead dips downward into a long, winding valley, sheltered by hills and ridges like the folds of a sleeping animal. It feels quieter here, even than before. Not lifeless, just listening. And that's when you see it. Just off the path, if you can even call this a path, lies a scatter of bones. Not crushed, not buried, arranged almost, like something died here with grace. With patience, you kneel beside them. A jawbone, a long femur, tiny, delicate phalanges. Fossilized, of course, but recognizable. This was a mammal, or rather, the early prototype of one. Welcome to the secret world of Gondwana, a clade of long-extinct mammals, or close relatives, that lived on the isolated fragments of Gondwana during the late Cretaceous. Think of them as evolutionary B-sides, strange little creatures with odd teeth, surviving in ecosystems ruled by dinosaurs. You trace the curve of the jawbone. The molars are unlike anything you've seen. Curved, grooved, shaped like a corkscrew turned into a dinner plate. No one really agrees what they ate. Seeds? Insects? Some even propose early grazing behavior. Your quirky tidbit: one genus of Gondwana, a Dalatherium, had more holes in its skull than any known mammal. It looked like a cross between a badger, a wombat, and a potato who had a long night. Scientists still aren't sure what most of those holes were for. Nerves? Blood vessels? Musical resonance? Historians and paleontologists still debate whether these animals were part of the mammalian family tree or just the evolutionary neighbors we don't talk about at reunions. But here they were, quietly thriving under the shadows of towering sauropods, building burrows, raising litters, surviving. You walk further into the valley and spot more burrow entrances, small, round holes lined with fossilized roots and hints of claw marks. These weren't predators. They were the persistent ones, living below the fray, beneath the stomping and roaring and volcanic drama. These are the mammals that waited it out. And in doing so, they gifted their DNA to a lineage that would, millions of years later, invent spreadsheets, espresso, and sleeping podcasts. The valley narrows, winding like a stream bed long since gone dry. You follow it, ducking under ancient overhangs and past outcroppings speckled with mica that twinkle under starlight. Each twist in the path feels like a memory, a fragment of forgotten life. At one point, you stop beside what looks like a fossilized nest. Inside are the faint impressions of fur, curled tightly into a ball. The body is gone, but the shape remains, a silent echo of a creature who once curled here to sleep. And that's the real wonder, isn't it? Gondwana wasn't just the stage for giants and titans. It was also the nursery of things that would someday become you. Small, warm-blooded, resilient, shivering through long nights, sharing heat, inventing quiet. This ancient world gave mammals a chance. Not the flashiest, not the fastest, not the fiercest, but the ones who could curl up and endure. You sit quietly now, near the nest. You imagine the burrows humming softly with breath, tiny ears twitching at distant sounds, generations huddling close, evolving without drama, without thunder, but with purpose. It's easy to love dinosaurs, but it's hard not to respect the mammals who outlasted them. You tilt your head back and see the stars again, brighter now, sharper. One even streaks across the sky like a whisper made visible. Somewhere in that infinite dome, your ancestors blinked awake, burrowed deeper, and waited for the world to change. And it did. You rise once more, brushing stone dust from your hands, and begin walking along the narrowing ridge that traces the edge of the valley. The stars have now become a canopy, a blanket of old fire hanging just above your head. And beneath it, the world grows quieter still. As you walk, the wind picks up just slightly, carrying with it the scent of sulfur and dust. A subtle heat radiates through your boots. Not enough to burn, just enough to suggest you've wandered into a place not entirely at rest. The land beneath you is volcanic. Ancient Gondwana was far from stable. It was a land stitched together by tectonic collisions, then pulled apart by the restless churning of Earth's mantle. You've now reached one of its forgotten fault lines, a stretch of land once racked by supervolcanoes, earthquakes, and eruptions that blackened the sky for years. Ahead, the path levels into a broad plateau speckled with fossilized lava flows, ripples and stone, frozen as they once flowed, like thick molasses poured over the land and stopped mid-drip. This is the cruciferous large igneous province, or what's left of it, an ancient supervolcanic region that erupted around 180 million years ago, just as Gondwana began to fracture. The eruption spewed millions of cubic kilometers of basalt across southern Africa and Antarctica, blanketing ecosystems and possibly triggering mass extinctions. You pause beside a tall basalt column rising like a ruined tower. Its surface is split into hexagonal shapes, a pattern formed when lava cooled slowly and cracked with geometric precision. It feels warm, ancient, like touching the rib of some stone god. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some researchers believe these eruptions may have released so much carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere that they helped create the perfect storm for dinosaur domination, wiping out competitors and kickstarting new evolutionary paths. Historians and geologists still argue whether the cruciferous events directly caused extinctions or merely pushed the dominoes. But the evidence is clear. The Earth here spoke with fire, and the world was never the same. You climb one of the columns for a better view. From the top, the plateau stretches in every direction. Fields of blackened stone, once molten rivers now frozen in mid-flow. It's not barren. It's paused. A landscape mid-transformation. And in the silence, you imagine the moment. The sky darkening with ash. Lightning crackling through smoke. Trees scorched in minutes. Rivers boiling. Dinosaurs stumbling through falling soot. Eyes wide, lungs heavy. Mammals hiding in burrows, trembling. And beneath it all, the plates of Gondwana beginning to shift. Because this wasn't just destruction, it was division. The eruptions coincided with the breakup of Gondwana. The land began tearing itself apart. Africa from Antarctica, India drifting, South America beginning its long journey westward. The Earth wasn't just venting pressure, it was reshaping continents. You sit at the edge of the stone column, legs dangling into the vast dark. Below you, a faint geothermal vent lets out the softest hiss, like a kettle that forgot it was boiling. And in this warm breath of the planet, you realize something. Gondwana didn't just vanish. It transformed. Its children, the modern continents, carry its fingerprints, its fossils, its weathered secrets. And so do you, because in your own bones, your own lungs, your own oddly mammalian brain are echoes of that ancient reshaping. You're made from continents that once hugged each other like tectonic puzzle pieces. The warmth from the vent curls around your face now, and you close your eyes. The stone is solid beneath you. The sky is vast above. Somewhere, Gondwana is still drifting, if not in space, then in memory. You stay on that basalt column longer than you expected. Long enough for the wind to shift, for the stars to roll slightly overhead, for the silence to grow velvet thick. There's no rush anymore. You're not trying to discover anything. You're just being, and maybe that's what Gondwana was always about. Not the drama of splitting continents or flaming skies or frozen oceans, but the quiet spaces in between, the long, slow breath of deep time, the patience of evolution, the trust that something will follow, even when everything around you is ending. You slide gently down from the rock and step once more onto the ground. The terrain now slopes downward, leading you into a kind of hollow, a circular depression ringed with stony spires and broken columns. It feels like an amphitheater, or a crater, or maybe both. In the center lies a tree, or rather, the fossil of one, upright, cracked with age, but unmistakably a trunk. Around it, other stumps rise like ancient sculptures. This was once a fossilized forest, trees that grew in one world and were preserved in another, trapped mid-growth by ash, sediment, or just sheer geological luck. This particular tree belonged to the genus Glossopteris, a type of seed fern that once blanketed much of Gondwana. With broad, tongue-shaped leaves, these plants formed thick forests during the Permian period, some 250 to 300 million years ago. They're long gone now, extinct, but their leaf fossils were so widespread across southern continents that they became key evidence for the theory of continental drift. It was Glossopteris that helped scientists realize that South America, Africa, Antarctica, India, and Australia had once been connected. Your quirky tidbit: these trees may have dropped their leaves seasonally, despite growing in polar regions. Imagine that. An Antarctic autumn, ferns turning golden, a soft wind scattering leaves across the permafrost. Historians and botanists still argue about how Glossopteris reproduced. Were their seeds windborne, insect-pollinated, water-dispersed? No one's quite sure, but we know they were everywhere until the Great Dying. You sit at the base of the fossil tree and rest your hand against its trunk. It's cold, of course, but smooth in places, still patterned with ridges that once held bark. You can almost see the forest return around you. Leafy canopies, thick undergrowth, soft chirps and rustles in the gloom. And then, quiet, as if someone flipped a switch, because this forest and the world that held it ended in the Permian-Triassic extinction event, Earth's worst mass extinction. Over 90% of species gone. Life's greatest reset button. But here's the thing. The forest didn't vanish in vain. It left you clues, fossils, patterns, a sense of connection across time and space. A way for you to reach back and feel something that happened hundreds of millions of years ago. You close your eyes, hands still resting on stone that was once sap and bark and sunlight. And you breathe, because this is where your journey ends, not in fire or ice or silence, but in the roots of ancient life. In the reminder that even the mightiest forests can fall, but their story can endure. This was Gondwana's gift, not just the creatures and climates and collisions, but the very idea that the past is still here, if you're quiet enough to listen. You lie down now on the forest floor, surrounded by stone trees and star branches. You feel the Earth's slow heartbeat beneath you, deep and steady. The same beat that pulsed through bacteria, through burrowing mammals, through leafing ferns and long-necked dinosaurs. And now, through you,